म्यूट करो तुम. Hey everyone, we're gonna start shortly. Firstly, welcome and thanks for being a part of this session, and thanks to the Astrolabs team for putting this up. So this session will be around 45 minutes, and we'll keep the last 10 to 15 minutes for a quick Q&A round. So starting with a quick introduction. So yeah, so my name's Bhuvan Batra. I'm currently the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Growth at a fintech startup, insurtech startup in Dubai. I've been an ex-founder as well. I exited the company to a $11 billion conglomerate. I'm also a global shaper at World Economic Forum, and I'm also a startup mentor for various startups in India and Dubai, right? So certain key concepts which we're going to be covering here are we're going to be start with jobs to be done framework. Then we're going to talk about how to create a sales process. Then we're going to dive a dip further to talk about sales playbook. Then we'll be talking about training and evaluation of performance of your sales reps. And then in the end, we're going to talk about the sales hiring strategy. Cool. So let's get started with the sales process, right? So what is a sales process? Sales process is essentially your set of repeatable steps which your sales team takes to move a prospect, or let's say lead, to a closed customer, right? Your sales process typically becomes the heart of everything your sales department or your sales team does. And if it does not support what your buyer needs, then very highly likely that it won't sustain for a very long time. And I think at every step you need to ask yourself, from a hiring salesperson to coaching your top performer, that it should tie back to your sales process, right? So let's get started with a deep understanding of the customer first. So there's a theory called jobs theory, right? So let's talk about me. So I'm 28 years old. I weigh 64 kilos. I work at a startup which has its ups and downs. I love playing video games. I've been trying to get back to the gym for a while, but failing to do so. And I can go on, right? But the point being, none of my attributes or characteristics which I have, they haven't yet caused me to buy, let's say, New York Times magazine today, right? So there might be a correlation between my characteristics and the propensity that I might have to buy the New York Times, but my attributes, they won't cause me to buy that product, nor will my characteristics or other attributes, right? So what exactly causes someone to buy something is because of the stuff that happens to us every day, and it's not the attributes of the person, right? So if you want to understand what your customers are trying to do, you're going to want to use this framework called the jobs to be done framework. It basically helps you dig into why people are buying your product, right? A textbook example is your power tools. People don't want to buy a drill. They want to buy a quarter-inch hole, right? Now, jobs theory takes this a bit further, and it says that people aren't even buying a hole. What they're actually trying to do is hang a picture or build a tree house, right? So if you start looking at your customers from this way, you'll understand that the way of thinking and how your customers look, it changes the entire it changes the whole way you look at your customers currently, right? So when you look at people who are buying the product to get the job done, and they think that is the size of the market, but actually the real market also includes people who are yet to buy the product, or they haven't bought the product because the current product is either too expensive or it's too complicated, right? I mean, Zoom is again a major example how Zoom came in, and now everyone's using video conferencing because it was just such an easier tool, right? So let's take an example, right? So McDonald's was trying to innovate their milkshakes, in USA, and they had tons of data. Uh, and if they did everything they could, but they still weren't able to increase the impact on the sales, right? So they approached this problem from the jobs to be done framework, right? So basically, they want to understand what job arises in people's life that they end up hiring McDonald's milkshake, right? So when they tried to dig deeper, it was found out that 50% of the milkshakes were bought before 8:30 a.m. And all these customers were alone and in the car, right? Something no one expected. 50% of the customers, right? So one day, these people were interviewed when they were exiting the driveway, right? So they would ask like, why did you buy the milkshake today? So one customer said that I usually eat a banana in the morning, but I end up finishing it fast, and by the time I reach office, I feel hungry, right? Then there was another user who said I consume Snickers, but I end up feeling guilty. There was another customer who would eat bagels, but he would say it's very dry and tasteless, and you know when I'm eating bagels, I have to steer the car with one hand. So what job essentially people were trying to do here was what McDonald's found out, that they basically had a long drive to work and they wanted something to keep themselves engaged.
Right? 100 dreams.
Sorry, can everyone?
People that you want to support, you want people to support you from your industry or from whatever you're trying to achieve. Successful people, people that really can help you.
Can you please keep yourself on mute?
Make them your fans if you don't have a system behind it. And a lot of people that I ask whether they have a networking strategy, a lot of times they say, okay, networking is something organic. I just meet people.
Okay, cool. Please, I request everyone to be on mute. Okay, so going on. Yeah, so basically what McDonald's found out that what job people were trying to get done was that they wanted something while they were driving to work, they wanted something to keep themselves engaged. And by the time they leave, they reach office, they don't want to feel hungry, right? Now, when McDonald's started looking at this problem this way, it changed the entire landscape. They changed the packaging, they changed the messaging and everything. And now they're not just looking at a market of milkshakes, right? They're looking at people who are consuming bananas, donuts, and bagels. And what eventually happened was that McDonald's was able to increase the sales of their milkshakes by 7 times, right? So uh, if you try to understand what your customers are trying to, why your customers are using your product, and what is the job they're trying to get done, you can help them in a much better way, right? You can also partner with different companies or solutions to provide them with a more comprehensive coverage. For example, I wanted to book something for my parents for their marriage anniversary, right? And I looked up a local bed and breakfast, and then there were fine dining restaurants, etc., etc. What I wanted was that if they could stay in a bed and breakfast and get the cuisine from a fine dining, and they could do some activities together, right? And then I found out a local farm which had tied up with a fine dining restaurant, and they were also providing some adventurous activities like rock climbing, etc. Right? Did I buy it? Yes. I did not even think twice before giving them my credit card details. So that is the real power of jobs theory. If you're really good at helping people get a job done, they'll be more than happy to pay you a premium price, right? So now, how do I identify the jobs your customers are hiring your product to do, right? So to do this, you need to interview a few of your existing customers. So uh, this is a very common image you would have seen somewhere, that basically you start following the customer's train of experiences and thought process till they actually buy or use whatever that thing is, right? So job theory is the best way to digging into why. So what you end up with is a storyboard which tells you how someone became your customer. And now with this, you want to understand that pattern of the events that led a customer to buy your product. And you'll be surprised to how long this timeline can be. This can be 18 months, this can be 16 months, this can be 36 months, right? So you need to interview your customers and ask them why did they buy your product, and you map that out for 10 to 12 customers, and you have your story, right? So then you ask them why did they buy it? You ask them how long did it take before they made this decision? What was it which made them uh, buy this? Was it an impulsive decision? If it was an impulsive buy, what caused that impulse, right? What was the alternative? When did they realize that now they don't want to use the alternative and they want to use your product, right? So when you do all of this, you basically come to your job, which other users are trying to do. So what does a job look like? So you can use a statement called a job story to describe the job your customers are trying to accomplish. So uh, this is how it looks like. So as a who is the person, when I am in the situation, I want to, what is the motivation so that I can, this is your outcome, right? So just taking the example which we discussed for McDonald's, as a morning commuter, when I'm driving to work, I want to have a snack so that I can keep myself occupied during the drive and get through the first few hours without stopping for breakfast. This is the job people are basically hiring the McDonald's milkshake to do, right? Now, in addition to the job theory, there are other dimensions to this as well. So these are basically your functional requirements, your financial requirements, your personal identity, and your social appearance, right? So functional requirements would be that what is the minimum functionality your product should have so that the customers can use it. For example, in case of a milkshake, you would want that while driving, he can hold it, or it can fit your cup holder. It's not too small, it's not too big, right? In terms of the financial requirements, you want to basically have your monetary guardrails so that you don't overcharge or you don't undercharge for the product which you're offering to the customer. Then there's personal identity. As I mentioned, there were customers who were eating candy bars, but they would feel guilty. So probably you can look into offering vegan or almond milk, low fat, so the users feel empowered by your product, right? And the last is social appearance. So in this case, in McDonald's, it's a drive-through. So people treat it as a safe space because they're not going to be seen by anyone, so they don't feel that they're going to be judgmental, right? So it basically all of this comes together to help you understand more about your customer, right? And once you get an intimate understanding of the job people are trying, or people are hiring your product to do, you'll be able to search for other people who want to have that job done as well, right? And but at the same time, I would like to add that different people can hire same product to do different jobs. So you need to make sure that what your product is good at. Like if someone is trying to, I don't know, lose weight, you wouldn't want to push a full fat McDonald's milkshake, right? So you need to basically make sure what your product is really good at. By doing this, by putting everything in the jobs to be done framework, your marketing will be able to position your products in a way that is meaningful. Your sales will be able to offer you insights into a person's situation, and they'll be able to provide solutions that the customer might not have been even able to think on their own, right? So now that we have the jobs to be done framework ready, so we're going to move ahead to understand how we can map a sales process. Okay, so I think sales process, as I mentioned earlier as well, it's basically a set of repeatable steps which you would want your sales rep to take so that it can move a prospect or your lead to a closed customer, right? And I think if you're a sales leader, the most important thing you can do is make sure your team is uh, following a very effective sales process, right? So, and defining a sales process becomes very essential for you to calculate and establish all the metrics at every step, right? So you hold the person accountable to specific metrics, right? And it also helps you understand where the your sales rep, what sales rep, and where does it need the training, right? And then you can help overall to hit your sales organization or your team's measurable sales objectives, right? And I think a lot of early stage founders or people who are trying to start up and they're just trying to find a good market fit, it's usually the sales founders which end up becoming the sales performers or the sales leaders, right? And the problem with that is uh, once they have mastered the sales process, they don't have a formal process around it, right? Like the founder would know how to pitch and everything, but they don't have a formal process. And then when it comes to scaling up, it's usually when they run into problems because they don't know. Uh, so you need to have a sales process, but there also has to be a balance. And it's actually something called a sales process paradox, right? It basically means too much process uh, kills your sales team, and without process, your sales team dies, right? So basically the idea is that uh, you have to give them some space so they can also be themselves and not dictate everything what they're doing. At the same time, you need to have your safe guardrails in which they can operate freely, right? That's the whole idea, right? So now that we have understanding of why people are buying our product, right? Now we need to understand the buyer. So we need to understand what challenges the buyers are facing, what are the metrics, how they're measuring their KPIs, and everything, right? So we need to start with the buyer's journey. Now, a buyer's journey is your active research process someone goes through leading up to a purchase, right? So it's a very popular saying that selling is about buying, right? So again, when there are early stage businesses who want to build up their sales, and I have experienced it multiple times, what usually happens is that if they have a product offering or a consulting business, they would come, they would sit in a room, and they'll be like, okay, this is what we do, this is what we have to offer, these are our features, these are our benefits, this is how much it costs, look at our case studies, and all of this would be assembled in a beautiful 10 slide deck. And so their playbook would be, let's go out, let's give this pitch, right? And this is something which is called as alligator selling, right? Because big mouth, little ears. So what I'm trying to say is that if you talk to the best salesperson, they would have a different pitch for every customer, right? It all comes down to the acute awareness of the buyer and personalizing your pitch to the buyer, right? So once we understand who the buyer is, we have to build a buyer journey. And there's a very simple framework. It's basically, it looks something like this. There's an awareness stage, consideration stage, and decision stage, right? So in awareness stage, they're basically discussing or talking about how they want to prioritize their next few months, the next quarter. What are they looking for? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? In consideration, they're trying to figure out: do I hire someone? Do I hire a consulting firm? Do I buy a product? Uh, and then in decision phase, they're trying to make a decision as okay, if I'm going to hire someone, who's it going to be? If I'm going to buy a product, what kind of product I'm looking at? Is it the cheapest one? Is it most extensible? Am I looking for a market leader? Or do I want to just look for what am I looking for in a consulting firm, etc. Right? So we need to understand all of these perspectives because this makes your pitch different for every user, every buyer, right? So now that we have all this understanding, I think now we are in a position to build a sales process that also assists the buyer throughout that journey, right? And it supports the buyer throughout that journey. And I think that is one of the most critical aspects which I believe a lot of people miss out on, right? So, uh, so basically now we have to define the steps, right? So uh, these steps are basically what the sales rep should take to move the good fit prospects or leads to move forward in their journey, right? So you basically have a journey and you have tasks in every stage, right? And keep in mind that when you're building this, you don't want to make them into a bunch of, I would say, robots, right? Because that would be counterproductive. So, uh, in other words, what I'm trying to say is that you basically have to draft a process and write down every step your seller or your sales rep would take to close a lead, right? So, for example, if I'm having a cold call with somebody and I have a product which requires a demo, now, if there are three people in the room, they would obviously go back. They would have an internal discussion. They would come back with further technical questions. So it makes zero sense for me as a sales rep to push somebody to close the lead. Right. This is an obvious example, right? So what also you need to keep in mind that while drafting the sales process, every step should have a very clear exit criteria, right? So exit criteria is basically the things that have to happen in order for a sale to move forward to the next step. Okay. So for each step in your sales process, you need to ask yourself, what does the sales rep need to do to make it move forward, right? So uh, is there any information they need to collect from the buyer? Is there any information they need to give to the buyer? Are there any certain commitments they need to secure? So that's the exit criteria of every step. And once you have all of this, this should all be in your CRM or whatever sales management tool which you're using, so that you have your clear cut pipeline. Now, go through this entire journey and list down all of those features, or rather take down all of those features based on this criteria, right? So number one, required; number two, factual; number three, inspectable; and number four, buyer centric, right? So first, let's start with required. So required is, let's say if there's a step in the buyer journey, you need to make sure that it can actually help things move forward, right? I mean, will they feel like a third meeting is productive, or will they feel like it's another maze you're dragging them in, right? Second, it has to be factual. You don't want your reps qualifying a lead just because they like them, right? Or how much they feel liked by them, right? You want your pipeline to be based on real action. Third is inspectable. Now, inspectable is something which is, it can be verified by a record inside your CRM. Now, for example, in a B2B sales, you're pitching, and your sales rep is going and pitching, and now there are some internal actions which they have to take. It can be an internal discussion. It can be looking at other players. It can be a good night's sleep, right? But there is no way to verify that. So every element, every step which is not inspectable, you need to take it out. And the last is keeping it buyer centric. So when I say buyer centric, it means that your sales rep shouldn't have the ability that, okay, I've done the demo and he moves the progress forward. No, it should be buyer centric in a way that, so probably now for the word demo, I'm going to change it to product evaluated. Why? Because now I'm also putting the task at the buyer end as well. For example, did they was another meeting scheduled, or did they agree to the proposal, or did they come back with any questions, right? So now it basically helps you understand that now, instead of sale moving to the next stage as soon as the rep is walking away from the demo, the sales representative can only move it to the next stage once they have asked, or once they have answered the buyer's question, right? So at every stage, you basically want a clear cut yes or no. You don't want a lot of ambiguity, right? So as a sales manager or as a sales leader, then you can just look at the pipeline and say, hey, I saw you move that sale to the next stage. Can I see the email where the buyer verified your next steps, or he came back with the questions, or where he acknowledged your email, the recap email, right? So from there, your conversion rate from one stage to another, you can clearly see. And if it's lower than what you would like, then you can focus on training and coaching your team to perform better in that particular stage. So it doesn't just come down to numbers. Now you have your entire pipeline in front of you, and you can say what's happening at every stage. And you can focus, okay, the conversion from this to this, from 100 leads is going down to 30. So let me work with the sales person to understand what's happening and how I can train and coach him, right? So So basically, another example, what I'm trying to show in terms of seller-centric and buyer-centric is similar to the demo, that if it's seller-centric, I can just say I gave a demo, but if it's buyer-centric, I would probably name it product evaluated and write things like, okay, buyer showed up, next meeting scheduled, respond to the recap email, etc. Right? So this is how typically your sales process would look like. So as you can see, it has both the components of a seller and a buyer. As you can see, the follow-up is not something which is required, which is what we discussed as a part of the sales process step criteria. So here we can easily remove the follow-up. Yes, identifying prospects, connecting, find time to meet, etc. Everything is important. Demo and evaluation of the product is important. Decision maker approving the purchase is important. So in short, we basically take out whatever is not required, non-factual, it's not inspectable, and something which is not buyer centric, right? So how this really helps you, and that's the beauty of this, is that basically for different sales reps, you can actually see, like, for example, Julie is basically lacking behind in step 4. So as a sales leader or as a sales head, I can now speak to Julie and try to coach and train her that why is the drop off happening from sales step 3 to step 4 and so on, right? But your relationship with the customer, it doesn't end after the sales is closed. So you should also focus on delivering whatever you have promised. So as a sales leader, probably you should have a chat with your customers every 3 months, every quarter, every 6 months, and you should understand if did they actually get the value that your sales reps were pitching, right? And that number should be ideally above 80 to 85%. Because you cannot build a business today on people who don't end up realizing the value of your pitch. So number 2, which you need to ask is yourself is, are they profitable? Are you making money out of them? In the world of SaaS, we talk about things like LTV to CAC ratios and payback periods, etc. And in general business, we talk about margins, operating margin, net margins, etc. So however you are measuring your business, you need to make sure that you're acquiring those customers and you're making money. Otherwise, it's of no use, right? And I think the best part is that it becomes very easy for you to sell to your existing customers. And it's a great way to find leads as well. And hence, once the deal is live, your sales representative or your account executive is still responsible to make sure that your buyer is extremely happy, he's extremely satisfied, right? So on top of this, now we have the entire sales process ready. So now we're going to probably talk about a layer on top of it called sales playbook, right? So as a salesperson, there are different types of sales methodology. There's a need-based selling in which I just go and ask what, why, how your product offers, what solution your product offers, etc. Right? Then there's a second scenario in which the buyer is not giving me enough clarity, but is talking about the problems, right? So now me as a seller, a sales rep, I can run with them and co-create a solution, right? Then there's a third one, a third scenario in which the buyer, they're very clear about the objectives. They know what they want to achieve in the next quarter. And you basically tell them how your product can help them out. And this is called an objective-based selling, right? And then there's something called insight-based selling. For example, there might be something which the buyer hasn't realized fully yet. And you think there's a lot of potential. So you can go and pitch that, okay, listen, this is another area which you can explore, and this is how my product can help you. So go for it. This is called insight-based selling. So now, whatever your sales methodology is, your sales playbook should have 4 critical areas for your sales representatives to make sure it covers everything, right? So it is basically what to know, what to do, what to say, and what to show, right? So starting from what to know, your sales rep should know, what product are they selling, what service are they selling, what sales methodology they're using, right? What personas they're actually focusing. That becomes very important as well. Then what do they do? What do they do? Talks about what are the steps, what are the strategies, what are the tactics, right? Uh, what a sales rep has to do before, during, and after a meeting to make sure that the buyer is engaged, right? The next step is, what do they say? So, what is the core messaging of your product? What is the storyline you want to tell to the customer? What case studies you want to show to the customer, right? And last is, what do they show? Uh, and I think in this age, I think sales rep should probably move away from, you know, your typical pitch sessions and probably move towards videos and whiteboard sessions in which you basically co-create and demonstrate the your offering to the consumer directly, right? And you can have compelling visual content and you can draw on the emotion of the actual buyer, right? So now, once you have your sales playbook built on top of your sales process, this basically should help you evaluate that where is your sales rep going wrong, and how you can come in as a sales leader to help him out, right? So, for example, now you know what particular area the your sales your team should have your training sessions, right? It doesn't make sense that you come in and you just throw everything to the sales rep in one go. It's like throwing spaghetti on a wall, right? You'll just see, okay, let's see what sticks. So I think this makes you understand that, okay, this is the area where I need to focus, and this is how I'm going to go about it as a sales leader, right? So this, I think, pretty much covers how to map out a sales process. And we're going to link this with another module called sales training, right? So, uh, so basically, some key elements of our team management is hiring, coaching, and training, right? So uh, now we just have to keep. Now, there's one thing I want to talk about before we move forward is the difference between training and coaching, right? So, uh, so what is so training is basically what your sales rep need to know, right? So, for example, I'm talking about how do they use the CRM system, what sales methodology they're using, what product offering they're doing, right? And coaching is how you're helping them to improve how they're doing that. For example, uh, if your sales rep has to open up a conversation or it's an opening pitch, he knows what it is, but he's not good at it, or he doesn't know how to do it properly. So that's where you come in and help him out. So this is the difference between training and coaching, which is often confused by a lot of people, right? So uh, statistically speaking, you cannot make a change uh, in a sales rep and expect things to happen overnight. Scientifically, it takes around 2 months, or I mean, to be more accurate, it takes about 66 days for a person to really change their behavior or something. So if you break that down, you're really looking at 4 behaviors that you can effectively change in one person in 1 year, right? So do you really want to just throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks? Or you want to basically take a step back and just focus on critical aspects that, okay, this is what the core competences of my sales reps should be. And this is the market we're selling. And now first we're going to cover the basics and then we're going to proceed forward, right? So you cannot just throw black belt material at someone without even knowing the basics of the martial arts, because it's not going to turn out to be good, and then it's going to end up leaving you frustrated as well, right? So now I think an interesting thing which you can probably try out in organizations if you want to understand if they really coach their salesperson is, and this is something I have done as well, that you go and ask the CEO, you go and ask the founder, do you coach your salesperson? They're like, yes, we coach them all the time. And you go and speak to the sales agent. You ask them, how's your coaching? How's the coaching going? And I have had personal experiences where the agents were like, what the heck is coaching? We don't get any coaching here. There's nothing like coaching, right? So this is a real disconnect when it comes to coaching. Uh, the purpose of coaching is to help the individual salespeople to understand what they need and how do you commit them to doing that, right? So this is the difference between, I would say, academia and corporate coaching. In academia, you tell them, okay, this is your exam, you write whatever you know, right? Whereas in coaching, you're basically telling them, okay, now you know, you have the knowledge, now put it to work, right? So when you train your reps, you need to tell them, okay, how to use the CRM, what product offerings are, etc. And in terms of coaching, you just focus on specific weaknesses, right? Now, something I think which a lot of you already know, the maximum level of motivation in most of the sales organization or the sales team comes towards end of the month, where the sales leader is pretty much cracking a whip, right? Is basically pushing everyone to hit their quotas. And that approach can work, but uh, it's not going to sustain, right? So, I mean, there's a story that there was a farmer and he had a goose and it would lay one golden egg. Now, he wanted two golden eggs. So, what he did, he basically squeezed the goose hard to get out two eggs. Was he able to get out two eggs? Yes. Did the goose survive the next day? No, right? So, what will happen in a sales organization is you might be getting two eggs, so they'll squeeze when the cracking of the whip comes, but it will just burn through the sales rep, right? And you're not really developing anything. You haven't solved any problem. Uh, and how it ends up for an organization is basically you have a revolving door of people in and out of the organization, right? So and also you can replace this one egg goose with two egg goose, and that's fine. You can find a rock star salesperson, and you can have your sales grow. But the moment someone comes along and hires them, offers them a better package, they leave, and they leave all that quota with you, and now you don't have your one golden egg goose as well, right? You've lost everyone. So I think when you're looking to hire salesperson, you should probably focus on how good are they in terms of following the process. I mean, I think all of us are looking for that, that salesperson who has been, who's a natural salesperson, who's like a diamond in the rough, right? But what's the point if they're not even able to follow the process? Okay, I'm an excellent salesperson, but I'm not going to follow up your details in the CRM, right? Does it help you as a sales leader? No. So you also need someone who can follow the process, right? So, uh, okay, let's take another example of successful coaching, right? I mean, it's again very common that, okay, so I've been learning to how to play golf, right? And uh, I asked my teacher, okay, what do I do? And he's like, okay, you need to lean in, you need to keep your eye level at this degrees, and you need to push your weight to the right foot, and you need to have a swing by this and this force. And I'm confused. Because just so much information has been thrown. Whereas a very good coach would say, okay, let's first put your weight to your right leg and take 100 swings, right? Okay, now once you're done that, now let's keep the eye level at this degree and take 100 steps, right? And so you understand where I'm going, right? So this is a more, I would say, an effective coaching mechanism rather than just throwing all the information, right? Uh, I think keeping the hiring, talking more about your hiring strategy. I think there are four key components you need to keep in mind. One is that you need to have a well-defined customer centric sales process, which we discussed. Then you need to have a deep understanding of target personas. You need to have a salesperson profile based on that target persona, and you need to have a very robust standardized interview process, right? Because salesperson are pretty much responsible for your company's revenue. So it becomes very critical, right? Without that revenue, there's no company, right? So you need to make sure that your sales hiring strategy is really solid. Cool. So I think what you're looking for is uh, making sure that the execution of that sales process is done correctly. So to do this, first you start with the defined customer-centric sales process, which we discussed. Then is a deep understanding of the target personas, right? Now, sales is very different from one industry to the next, or from one buyer to the next, right? So you need to hire those sales people who can succeed with your target persona, right? I mean, they can be people who are very good at in talkings with the CXOs, right? Growth and uh, uh, your top level and everything, right? Then there are other level of sales rep who are very good at just simple transactional selling, right? And then there are other sellers who are just good at, let's say, process level conversations. So there is no best practice. It all depends on your buyer journey, which you've mapped out, and you need to understand. You need to ask yourself what product you're offering. Is it a new product? Is it an old product? Has it been around for 30 years, or is it brand new? What is the competition? Are you selling $10 million jets, or are you selling $50 widgets? Right? You need to understand that what is that you're selling. Based on that, you need to have a salesperson which meets and which can talk to this target persona, right? And just I think what really helps is try to understand in your current sales team who are the rock star sales performers, what are the attributes, right? Based on this, you can actually come up with a interview process and have scoring at every question so that it becomes standardized, right? And you can basically keep on improving your process as well, because if something goes wrong, you can reflect back and see, okay, what went wrong, what was the problem, even though we asked these questions, or we had these interviews, what went wrong, right? So again, you have again established yourself a test, learn, iterate, and feedback loop, which effectively really helps you hire good salesperson. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. Thank you so much. Feel free to reach out to me. I'll be open for any questions and answers now.
I have a question if it's
Sure,
okay.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
So one thing I find difficulty is, like, for example,
Hmm.
if a person has his own company, he's the founder.
Right,
Initially, he's the one who's pitching and trying to get as much projects in as possible. But
correct,
eventually, there comes a time when the person has to hire a sales representative, be it a junior or a senior level.
correct,
So
correct.
my question to you is, like, how do I make sure that this salesperson who's not a co-founder is as motivated as I was when I was trying to get deals into the business?
Right. So I think, like I said, once you start, and this is something very common, what you just mentioned, that as an early stage founders, I would go out, I would pitch, and in the entire process, I would have mastered the sales strategy. But what I miss out is basically creating a formal process around this, right? So at the end of the day, there's no sales process which I have defined. So as an early stage founder, or as an early stage entrepreneur, as a founder, what you really need to do is basically make sure that you have buyers, what I actually discussed, you have your entire journey mapped out, so you can help your sales rep proceed forward, and you can help understand where the problem is, right? You can actually help them train and coach to understand where is he falling off. Okay, he gave the demo, but not a lot of people are converting after the demo, right? So you have your pipeline in front of you, and okay, this is the area where I need to coach, right? And the second aspect which you talked about is motivation. Is something slightly different. Is basically that I think has to come from you as a sales leader to basically make sure that you basically care for them. It can be by doing something very small, like conducting training programs, or helping them out, let's say, uh, if they want to do some personal development certifications and courses, you can help them out, right? So I think if you are able to incorporate all of these factors, you would not have a problem, and at the end of the day, you would basically have a sales rep where you can help and coach them at the area analytically, and help them progress forward.
All right. Thank you.
Cool. Anyone else? Okay, I think that's pretty much for today's session. Feel free to reach out to me in case you have any questions. Thanks again for everyone for taking out time. I hope you had a great time as well. So thanks once again, and have a great evening.